¿Qué lo que hay, mi gente? Welcome to Let's Hablar Solita podcast, brought to you by Hablemos Productions. Vamos a hablar de todo sin filtro. Let's talk without a filter. ¿Qué lo que hay, mi gente? Welcome to Let's Hablar Solita podcast. I am your host, Maya Ladies 7, and thank you for joining us. This is part 2 of the Greenville. So I know I gave a slight breakdown to part 1 and 2 of the series The Green Veil. Well, I have now finished the whole series. It is again found on the network. I know that my links have not been clickable. I'm trying to fix that on YouTube. It's very difficult. Hopefully I can get that fixed soon. But in the meantime, just know it is the network. I will post the links on social media. If you follow me, it's Maya Ladies 7. You can also look for Hablemos Productions and you will see that the links are clickable in the comments and or in stories. So you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on TikTok, you can find us on Amazon, you can find us on Spotify and Apple as well. Now, Greenville. What can I say other than I truly enjoyed this series. I love hated it. That's the best way that I can describe it because it's one of those relationships, you know? It's the type of series that you feel is necessary in today's climate and in any climate. And it's also one that you hate because it's very real. It's not, again, in the first time I spoke about this show, I said it wasn't about someone's story specifically, but it has real events that took place in our history as a country. En el primer video que hice sobre este tema, mencioné que este serie está basado en eventos que sí pasaron en Estados Unidos. No necesariamente tiene que ver con una historia específicamente, pero son ocasiones que sí funcionaron, no funcionaron, pero sí sucedieron en este país, que nosotros llamemos el Estados Unidos. I do want to say that this episode may be a trigger warning to some of you. To some of you, it may be interesting. If it's a trigger warning, if you don't like it, you can exit out of the video. You can exit out of the streaming service. I am not going to sugarcoat this series. I think it's necessary. Again, we meet the main characters in part 1 and 2. We meet John Leguizamo, who plays Gordon Rogers, a self-loathing ignoramus. And by the way, it's not Mexicans that are taking the jobs, okay? Son los puertorriqueños, los caribeños, because John Leguizamo is playing a Mexican man who is pretending to be white. And that was a joke. Okay, no se enojen. Nomás estoy bromeando. Mabel Rogers is Gordon's bored housewife. She's supposed to be perfect. She's supposed to be mindless. She's supposed to be just a homemaker and nothing more. She is played by Hani Furstenberg. We have Abby, the adopted daughter from the Rogers, played by Isabel Poliner. The Suttons, Jeannie Sutton by Irene Bedard, an Indigenous actress. And we also have John Ortiz, who plays Mr. Sutton. It starts in the 1950s. Again, trigger warning, this is not a specific story to a specific family, but they are events that took place. And it does have
bits and pieces of a story that happened to a real family. We learned in episode 1 and 2 that Native and Indigenous children were being ripped away from their homes and being placed in what they would consider boarding institutions. I don't want to say boarding schools, because when I think of a boarding school, I think of an educational institution. I don't necessarily think of a place that's the children are being taken to be re-educated against their will, and or to force, and it's made to force the families to either hand over lands so that way oil companies can take them over, or to disappear them completely so that way oil companies can take over the land. I think it's important to educate ourselves. I had heard about instances like this because, for those who don't know, and I've said it throughout the time that I've been doing social media, my mother is very much into history, and we watched all kinds of shows. We watched the History Channel, we watched tons of stuff, documentaries, all kinds of stuff growing up. So for me, books, my mom always thought history was important for me to learn. We learned that they would stage crop circles and or extraterrestrial events to make it look as if they had been abducted by something outside of this world, placing the children in boarding homes and then rehoming them, boarding schools and rehoming them, often almost brainwashing them to fit a standard that they felt could be useful. And then we learned about the role of women in the 1950s, which I know some people would probably wish that we remain in that place, and I think it's atrocious. I think women deserve to have purpose, and we deserve to be able to decide what that purpose is. We learned about Mabel's actions and her duties. We learned about what she needed to do and what was expected of her and what had to be done. We know that in the end of episode 2, Mabel had a lack of purpose. Mabel did not feel like she was fulfilled. Again, that's why I say I think that us as women, we want to have purpose. We want to have a sense of duty that's our own, that's not necessarily in casa. You know what I mean? So for me, it's episode 1 and 2. It's very, I'm just kind of reiterating what we saw there, so that way some of you who didn't listen to the last episode can kind of know what we're talking about, Then we learned that Mabel is bored. Mabel doesn't want to just stay home. Mabel gets a little nosy one day cleaning La Casa, and she finds some stuff that's in her husband's drawer, and she's like, you know what? Eso se me hace raro. I'm gonna go look. And she goes on her own little investigative, tendencies, and she goes and does her own little investigative work. She's her own little FBI agent, if you will. And she ends up going to the Sutton property. The Sutton property, again, in the beginning of the story, we see that an Indigenous child is being taken from her home, and it is the Sutton property. When she goes, she sees there's a crop circle tour being given, and she takes the crop circle tour, and she asks about the Sutton family, and no one can tell her anything about it, and she's confused. That's when the allegiance, I guess you would say, between adoptive child and an adoptive parent, or mother, kind of happens, and they try to back each other up. Doesn't necessarily work out in their favor. Um, Gordon is kind of like in a happy mood, based off of this allegiance. There was like a little white lie that was made, and he feels important, wants to brag with his family, and he takes them to the Sutton property to go see this crop circle. And it turns out the guy who was given the crop circle tours is a agent himself. So he snitches. He snitches on Mabel, which causes Gordon to be suspicious of his wife and punish his child by making her kneel on rice from night until morning. Which, if those of you think that, oh my god, that's nothing, it's very painful. It's very effing painful. It can give off a burning sensation, especially if the rice is not cooked. Just imagine all that starch. We start seeing that Gordon is not happy about his wife's extra, curricular activities, and he decides to spy on his wife. He follows her around while she's doing her little investigative work to find out what's going on with the Suttons. She wants to know something about their case, has her extremely invested to the point where she has to go find out what's going on. She doesn't know what's going on, so she wants to know, and she goes in and begins to look for them, and he follows her around, and he starts to realize he's in trouble here, right? Because he's supposed to be an FBI agent. This is supposed to be top secret. No one is supposed to know about this. This is classified information. And it becomes a problem because she starts going to the police, and she starts going asking questions, poking around. She starts pretending that she's an FBI agent to try to get answers. And he realizes his perfect wife is not so perfect anymore, that she has a mind of her own. But she can't let it go either, so she's going to go search for answers. And in episodes 3 and 4, we eventually find out that Mabel had a whole nother life before this. She was a pilot. So back in the 1950s, women were allowed to test aircrafts that were used within the military, on a very hush-hush type of business. And she happens to be one of those people who were testing the aircrafts. And she misses that sense of importance. She wants to do that again. She wants to be a pilot again. And this gives her, this pretending to be a a FBI agent kind of gives her that sense of, I'm an FBI agent. This is my job. And it makes her feel important again. Gordon, played again by John Leguizamo. His family is a sham. He is losing it, and he is completely, this is episodes 5 and 6. He is losing it. His family's a sham. This is all wrong. It's just, he's distraught, doesn't know what to do. And then an aspiring neighbor decides to ask for help because Gordon is like the picture perfect image of what a family should be, right? The Rogers family is the picture perfect image for that. And he asks for help because I guess they're having trouble trying to adopt a child or trying to get a child of their own. And they would love to have a daughter like Gordon's Abby. And so Gordon does all that he can to get the Sutton's child, who was abducted in episode 1, to be their child. He ends up getting his way, and they adopt her essentially. And they are so thankful that they get to have this young girl become part of their family. And she doesn't want to be a part of their family. She's like, hey, I'm like, I have parents. You guys are not my parents. I have parents. Like, this is not me. This is not my casa. This is not my family. And she's asking for help. And Mabel has come across the truth, and she has unmasked what has happened to the Suttons, and she's trying to locate them. In episodes 5 and 6, we start to kind of see Gordon's work life kind of unravel as well, where he is not what he thinks he is. Like, he's not as important as he thinks he is. And he cannot take it. He cannot take the fact that he is losing what he thinks is his salvation. And that's where we leave off on 5 and 6. 7 and 8. 7 and 8, we finally hear, I can't say them because I don't want to violate community guidelines. They're very offensive. We hear more slurs towards Latinos, and they're directed at Gordon because, I mean, he's always just going to be brown, right? He was never, what Gordon failed to realize, you were never going to be one of them. You were only socially accepted by them for a purpose, because you had a good idea. You had an idea of how to get children from their homes to this boarding institution and how to get the land so that way they could sell it to big oil. But they did not, you're not a permanent member. You're just you're like a sympathy invite. You're like someone's plus one, essentially. And we start to hear the racial slurs, and that he will always be the mailroom guy because that's where he started. It was the mailroom. And Mabel helps, the Suttons get their child back. Abby escapes, and I don't like what happened with Abby. I'm not going to go into too much details because I want you guys to watch and to really feel it. We also have an episode 8 commentary by the daughter of the family where some of these events were pulled from, speak. And Gordon, at the end of the day, returns to Casa. Again, he was just a sympathy invite, right? You were only permitted to sit at the table because you had an idea. You were not given a permanent seat. And at the end of the day, they deported him. They deported him back to Mexico. Lo llevan a la frontera y lo dejan ahí. Sin nada. Sin maleta, sin dinero, sin nada. Se queda sin nada. Como el pobre desgraciado que es. And I say that with my whole chest. He is a bastard. I completely and utterly hated Gordon Rogers. John Leguizamo, you made me hate you. You made me absolutely hate you. And you've played a bad guy in other movies, but I don't think I've ever hated you this much. I don't think I've ever hated John Leguizamo in a role this much. Te odié. Te odié. I hated Gordon Rogers with a passion. I was like, ¿quién te crees, güey? Tú nunca vas a ser parte de ellos. Ellos nomás te están utilizando para hacer lo que ellos quieren, y luego cuando terminan te van a brotar como si fueras basura. Like, they'll throw you away like you're trash. And that's exactly what they did. He served his purpose, and once he became a problem, they disappeared him. Eventually, they made it look like, the Sutton family just disappeared. The government made him look as if almost they never existed, which was interesting. The Suttons Also they lost their property. They didn't get to maintain their property, which is really sad at the end of the day because the government took over the property. But this shit happened in our history. This happened in our history. And I feel like, and I don't know it to be true, I can only say it's allegedly or it's just a thought, but I feel like stuff like this is still happening because we have so many Indigenous children, so many Indigenous people that go missing, and it feels like our government, our law enforcement don't do anything about it. And that's what's really, really sad. That's what's really, really sad, you guys, is that this show brought to attention a moment in history that I feel is repeating itself. And it's something that I heard a long time ago. There's that, history always repeats itself. It repeats itself because we become ignorant to it, if that makes sense. We become ignorant to the fact that it happened, that it existed, that it was something that was real. And we become ignorant to the fact that it can repeat itself. We just think, it happened and it's not going to ever happen again. Well, how is it never going to happen again if we don't do something to prevent it? If we just pretend that it never happened, then it can very likely happen again. So for me, that's how I feel about this. I feel like people are going missing, and it has to do with land. It has to do with land. And I feel like that I really do feel like that's what it is. And I hate conspiracy theories. I'm not one of those people. It's not something that I would usually discuss, but I really feel like that's what it has to deal with, and it has to do with fear of the fact that we are the true Indigenous people. We are the true proprietors of this land, and that is scary to some. And I really wish that these events didn't happen in history. I wish that they weren't happening now. I wish that there weren't so many Indigenous women and children and young men that would go missing and then found unalived, and that there wouldn't be justice done. I wish that wasn't the case, and I wish there was a way to find out why it's happening other than just hate. But I don't know how to be more helpful, if that makes sense. Like, I would like to help more, but I don't know how. I would love to speak with tribal leaders on the matter. I would love to speak with John Leguizamo about it as well, about what he learned and how he feels that maybe we can help bring to the attention that there are so many Indigenous people that are still missing to this day, and that nothing has been done to give justice. I would love to have them as a guest, but I also don't want to be disrespectful to the community. I do think that we need to atone. We need to recognize what we did wrong. We need to recognize where we failed. We need to acknowledge the mistakes that were made in this country, and we need to apologize for them. Apologies are not just words either. Apologies are with actions. Disculpas no deben de ser solamente con palabras, deben de ser con acciones. En mi opinión, yo creo que cuando alguien siente de verdad que están en el lado equivocado, y ellos de verdad se arrepientan de cómo se comportaron, se compruebe con hechos. And so I feel like we need to have action created in this country to be able to remedy some of the actions that were done. But I don't see that happening because we live in a country that unfortunately a lot of people choose to just either turn a blind eye or they're thinking that it's just made up. Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. And it's getting worse. I never thought that it would. I always thought that as I got older, that certain things would change and that my children would live in a world free of bigotry and free of all of this anger and self-loathing from our community. And I feel like instead of progressing, we're digressing. We're going backwards. So I really do recommend this show. Please show it to your kids. Please show it to your kids. It's important. They deserve to know what happened in this country. They deserve to know their history. I hated seeing someone not be proud of who they were and someone help destroy someone else's family and hurt someone else's family, yet not care. It was, animals don't act like that. So for me, that was really painful. That was really painful to watch. So that's why I say trigger warning, because it was really, really painful to watch. I say watch it because it's important to watch. I say we need more shows about Indigenous people and about the actual history of what was done to Indigenous people. And I think that we need to have more call to action of what's being done to the Indigenous people today. So I'm also going to find some links that will help the understanding of what can be done to help Indigenous communities when it comes to the missing. But I can't stress enough, you guys. This was an excellent show. I've heard that it's going to be nominated for some Emmys. Hopefully it wins. Hopefully there's some awards for this show. And hopefully we'll have more shows like this on the network. My only complaints with this show, probably my only complaints, is I feel like we didn't see enough of the Suttons. I feel like we didn't see enough of the Suttons. We saw a lot about Gordon. We saw we saw a lot about Mabel, Abby a little bit too, but we didn't see enough about the Suttons. We didn't see a lot about Glennie, and we didn't see enough about Mr. Sutton either. We didn't see enough of their daughter. We didn't see a lot about the boarding institutions. That would probably be my only critique that I would add, is we didn't see enough of that. But other than that, I would give it a 5. I think we need more shows like this. I think that that's where it fell short for me, was we needed more of the Suttons. We needed more of the boarding institutions. We needed more of the treatment that the children were going through in the boarding institutions, even though that I know that that would have been triggering. But I think that it was essential. I think that mind you, I know that this is a new platform and that the streaming service is free. You don't have to pay for the subscription. You don't have to pay to watch all of the episodes. It's completely free. So I understand that. I understand that it's free, but I think that because it's free doesn't mean that you can kind of cut corners. So that would be my only but would be we needed more about the Indigenous people. We needed more about them, even though I know that this story was mainly focused on how the government was doing stuff. I still think that was where it lacked. So that would be my critique when it comes to this particular show, would be we needed more of the Suttons, the Sotons. We need more of them. We needed more of what was going on with their daughter prior to her being placed in the home of these Caucasian people who she was like, I don't even know who these people are. I want my parents. Like, who are you guys? Dame mi familia. But oh yeah, I think that was where they fell short. So, mi gente, embrace your family, love your family, hug your children. Every day is special, and de verdad es. I can't imagine. I can't imagine having my child ripped from me, and I can't imagine not knowing where they're at, and I can't imagine being put in prison because I'm refusing to back down from being separated from my kid. So that is my only critique. I know that sounds like it's a lot, pero de verdad, that was my only critique, is I would have loved to have more Indigenous camera time and more Indigenous focus. But I do know that this particular series, their main focus was to bring awareness about what the government was doing. And I think that in that being their focus, they were probably like, well, that's going to take away from the focus, but it would have helped if they would have demonstrated that, in my point of view, my opinion. I don't know. John Leguizamo, I know I'm a small-time podcaster, but you're invited to Let's Hablar Solita podcast para hablar sobre esto. Tú me puedes decir si estoy equivocada o no, why you guys didn't decide to do that. I would love to hear it. I, again, would love to speak to Indigenous leaders. If you can watch the show and tell me your opinion, tell me a little bit more of the historical facts and the things that are actually going on within the community of Indigenous people now, so that way we can be of help, then I would appreciate that, and I would love to help. Again, I think it's important, and I think that it's something that we need to look into, and that I'm open to being all ears for. It's never too late to learn, and it's never too late to be part of a solution and not part of a problem. And I don't want to be part of a problem. So, let's do it, mi gente. Let's do it together. Let's allow ourselves to be educated together. Hopefully there'll be more shows that give enlightenment and that spark change. Hopefully that is the case. It sparked something in me. Again, if there is any Indigenous leader of any Indigenous organization who would like to speak to me, you can email me, and I will put the email right here in this corner. I will, of course, do some digging to see if you are indeed a Indigenous leader, because I am not going to just speak to someone who is pretending to be something they're not. I will try to verify you. Trust me, I have the means to do it. So thank you for tuning in on the full review of the Greenville. It was a really great show, and I think that we need more shows like it. I think out of a 5-star rating, I would give it a 5. I would give it a 5, and the reason why I would give it a 5 is because they did not play it safe. They did not play it safe. for the budget that they had, they did not play it safe. So it's a 5-star rating for me. Tell me what you think. Watch it for yourselves. Dime lo que piensan. Ponlo en los comentarios. Si lo ven, por favor, venlo con los ojos abiertos y con la mente abierta. Bendiciones, mi gente.
Gracias, mi gente, for tuning in to Let's Hablar Solita podcast. Bendiciones siempre. Remember, aquí hablemos sin filtro. Bye.